Well, an ancient discovery is shedding light on the early church. The Megiddo mosaic dates back nearly 2,000 years, and experts believe it decorated one of the earliest Christian worship sites in Israel.
Wow, look at that! Oh, it's just coming to life. That's unbelievable. My brain is exploding right now.
It looks like it was written just a few hours ago.
It really does.
What if some of Jesus' most powerful words never made it into the Bible we read today? For centuries, people believed the story was complete. Every teaching recorded, every moment preserved, nothing left out. The assumption was that the final text told the whole truth. But recent discoveries are forcing historians to face an uncomfortable reality. The early Christian world was far more complex than we were ever taught. Over the past 100 years, ancient manuscripts have emerged from caves, deserts, and long-forgotten archives. Written in Greek, Coptic, and Aramaic, these texts reveal sayings attributed to Jesus that sound familiar, yet not exactly the same. The message feels sharper, more direct, sometimes even more intense. These writings weren't random fabrications or fringe ideas. They were carefully copied, openly discussed, and widely circulated among early believers. At some point, however, they were set aside, excluded when the biblical canon was finalized, and that raises a question no one can easily ignore anymore. What else was left out? But one of the most surprising discoveries didn't come from a cave at all. It was hidden beneath mud. Along the northern shore of the Sea of Galilee, archaeologists began excavating a site that many scholars had already written off. Ancient pilgrims had long claimed this was the home of Peter, the fisherman who became one of Jesus' closest followers. Most modern historians were skeptical. They believed the real location had to be somewhere else. The excavation itself was anything but exciting. Thick mud, constant water seeping into the site. Weeks of digging with almost nothing to show for it. Then a shovel struck stone. Not loose rubble, not scattered debris. Solid construction. Slowly, straight walls began to appear. Clean lines, precise angles, careful design. As more earth was cleared away, the curved outline of a church apse came into view. This wasn't a random ruin. The team had uncovered a Byzantine church nearly 1,500 years old. When the dirt was finally washed away, color emerged. A mosaic floor, reds, blues, gold, astonishingly well preserved. Ironically, the mud that buried it had also protected it. Embedded within the mosaic was a Greek inscription honoring Peter. That alone was remarkable. But what truly stunned the archaeologists was what the church was built on. It hadn't been constructed on empty ground. It stood directly above something far older, a structure from a much earlier time, hidden beneath centuries of history. Which means early believers may have considered this place sacred long before any official church authorities organized Christianity into the form we recognize today. If the structure was truly built over Peter's original home, then the stories told by ancient pilgrims weren't legends at all. They were memories. And that changes everything. Because if the earliest followers went to such extraordinary lengths to preserve physical places connected to Jesus, then what about his words? What teachings were remembered, repeated, and carefully guarded, yet never included in the final version of the Bible? What lies beneath that church floor doesn't just point to a building. It points to a deeper layer of history, one that suggests something else may have been preserved and possibly left out. And before we reveal what these ancient texts actually say, make sure to like and subscribe, because most people have no idea this discovery even exists, the capital of the apostles. To understand why this mosaic matters so much, you first have to understand where it was found. This wasn't Jerusalem, it wasn't Nazareth, this was Bethsaida. If you know the Bible, that name should immediately stand out. Bethsaida was the hometown of Peter, Andrew, and Philip. It was the place where Jesus healed a blind man. It was near where the feeding of the 5,000 took place. In many ways, Bethsaida functioned as a working hub for the earliest apostolic movement. But Bethsaida is also remembered for something far more unsettling. It was one of only 3 cities that Jesus openly condemned. In the Gospel of Matthew, Jesus pronounces judgment on the city, declaring, "Woe to you," rebuking it for witnessing miracles yet refusing to change its ways. He warns that it would be brought down to Hades. History suggests that warning came true. By the 4th century, Bethsaida had become a ghost town. It vanished from maps. Roman writers stopped mentioning it altogether. It was as if the ground itself had swallowed the city whole. For nearly 2,000 years, no one could agree on where Bethsaida had actually stood. Two locations fought for the title. One was a rocky hilltop filled with impressive ruins, dramatic, well-preserved, and convincing at first glance. But it sat far too far from the water to make sense as a fishing village. The other was a muddy, swamp-like shoreline, the site where this excavation was taking place. It looked unremarkable, unimpressive, easy to dismiss. The debate became fierce. Entire academic careers were built around proving one site correct and the other wrong. Then the church was discovered, and everything changed. When archaeologists dug beneath the Byzantine mosaic floor, they uncovered a layer of destruction. Beneath the church were Roman-era homes, not palaces, not administrative buildings, fishermen's houses. The team found lead net weights, fishing hooks, and coins dating back to the 1st century. This was the evidence scholars had been waiting for. A working fishing village active during the exact years Jesus was alive. It was the smoking gun. But there was one more twist, and it made the discovery even more unsettling. The way this church was built tells a story, not of coincidence, but of obsession. The Byzantine builders didn't place it at random. They aligned the entire structure with extraordinary precision, centering it directly over the remains of one specific house. And that raises an obvious question. Why this spot? In the ancient world, you didn't construct a massive basilica over an ordinary fisherman's home unless that place carried deep meaning. The architects of the 5th century went to incredible lengths to preserve this exact location. They erected protective walls around the original room. They treated the dirt floor of the old house not as debris, but as something sacred. Every detail points to the same conclusion. The builders were fully convinced they were standing on the actual home of Peter. Skeptics might say the Byzantines were simply guessing, but in the ancient world, memory was far more reliable than we often realize. People didn't depend on maps or written records the way we do today. They relied on living memory. Grandfathers brought their grandsons to this place and said, "This is where the rock of the church once lived." And the discoveries at El-Araj suggest something truly remarkable. Despite the curse spoken over the city, despite its disappearance from history, a small group of believers remained. They guarded the location. They kept its identity hidden, and they passed that knowledge down generation after generation. When the empire finally embraced Christianity, they did what they had waited centuries to do. They marked the site. But this wasn't meant to be a simple memorial. It was a vault, and sealed inside that vault was a message designed to survive the ages. A sentence meant to pull future generations back to the moment Jesus spoke directly to his followers. This is where things become complicated, because what they embedded into the floor wasn't a verse taught in Sunday school. As conservators carefully removed layers of dirt and decay, Greek letters slowly began to appear. The team gathered around, cameras flashing, hearts racing. An expert in ancient Greek was brought in immediately to translate the inscription on site. At first, the text opens with a formal dedication to a bishop. Nothing unusual for a Byzantine church. Then the tone changes. The inscription begins speaking about Peter, and not casually. It calls him the chief and commander of the heavenly apostles. That phrase is explosive. In theology, language is never accidental. The specific Greek words used here imply rank, authority, and a clear chain of command. They suggest that by the 5th century, right here in rural Galilee, Peter was viewed not merely as one disciple among many, but as the supreme leader. That strikes at the heart of one of Christianity's longest-running debates, authority. The Catholic Church grounds its legitimacy in the belief that Peter was the first pope, the rock upon which the church was built. Many Protestant traditions argue the opposite, claiming Peter was simply a leader among equals. But buried beneath the mud of Peter's own hometown is a text that supports the supreme commander view. It shows that local Christians, the people who lived where Peter lived, believed he was in charge. And there's more. The inscription also identifies Peter as the key-bearer. That phrase points directly to the moment when Jesus is said to have given Peter the keys to the kingdom of heaven. But the mosaic doesn't stop there. And this is where the story takes a truly wild turn. The researchers soon realized the inscription wasn't a single block of text. It was set inside a medallion, a circular frame. And within that border, barely visible, were smaller, fainter letters. They were hard to see, as if worn down by thousands of footsteps over centuries. Or perhaps they had been carved lightly on purpose, meant to be seen only by those who knew where to look. To the naked eye, the words were almost invisible. So the team brought in advanced imaging equipment. Infrared scanners were used to peer beneath centuries of grime and damage. When the images appeared on the screen, the entire tent fell silent. What they were seeing was a continuation of the inscription, a quote, written as direct speech. words spoken by the Lord himself, addressed directly to his disciple. Ancient churches often display passages from Scripture on their walls or floors, so, at first glance, this didn't seem unusual. But the text uncovered here didn't match any known biblical manuscript. It wasn't a standard quotation. It was different. A variation, a deviation, or possibly something even more unsettling. It may have been an earlier version, one that was later altered or left out entirely. The mood at the excavation shifted instantly. This was no longer just an artistic or architectural discovery. The team was looking at what appeared to be a record of a conversation that took place nearly 2,000 years ago, just steps from where they were standing. The words felt personal, intimate, and they hinted at a cosmic role, an assignment unlike anything preserved in accepted Scripture. The scans revealed something no one expected, a reference to the preparation of heaven itself. Once the infrared images were processed, linguists went to work. They carefully reconstructed the broken letters hidden within the faint inner ring of the mosaic. Slowly, a sentence came into focus. It read something like this: "Guard my house, for I go to prepare the heavens." Pause on that for a moment. Guard my house. In the Gospel of John, Jesus tells Peter to feed my sheep. In the Gospel of Matthew, he calls Peter the rock on which the church will be built. But nowhere in the accepted New Testament does Jesus tell Peter to guard my house. And then there's the second line, "For I go to prepare the heavens." We're familiar with a similar phrase, "I go to prepare a place for you," from John 14. But this wording is different, and that difference matters. It suggests a division of responsibility. Jesus departs to prepare what comes next, while Peter is left behind as a kind of watchman over what remains. That raises a crucial question. What exactly is the house? If it were only a metaphor for the church, the phrase wouldn't hit quite so hard. But remember where this inscription was found. The church was built directly over a house, Peter's house. So what if the ancient tradition wasn't just that Peter once lived here? What if it remembered something more specific? What if Jesus explicitly told him, "Stay here, protect this place"? This is the anchor point. That idea lines up with something scholars refer to as a grapha, sayings attributed to Jesus that survive in ancient sources, but never made it into the Bible. Dozens of these sayings exist. Some are puzzling, some are deeply moving, but finding one permanently carved into the floor of a major pilgrimage site gives it extraordinary weight. It suggests the people of Bethsaida remembered something the gospel writers chose not to record, and the phrase "guard my house" radically reshapes how we understand Peter's role. It doesn't portray him as an administrator or a manager. It casts him as a protector, a sentinel, someone standing watch. But standing guard against what? That's where the speculation begins. In early Christian belief, sacred places weren't considered peaceful by default. They were seen as battlegrounds, locations thought to draw resistance, places where unseen forces pushed back the hardest. Demons, according to early tradition, were believed to despise holy ground. So when Jesus tells Peter to guard the house, it may not have been symbolic at all. It may have been an assignment, one that went far beyond preaching or leadership. A spiritual duty rooted in protection. This discovery does something else as well. It collapses the distance between legend and reality. It grounds the story. It turns abstract ideas, like the keys to heaven, into something tangible and practical. After all, keys aren't symbols by nature. They're tools meant to lock, guard, and protect a real place. In that sense, the mosaic suggests that the earliest believers viewed this exact spot, this specific stretch of mud in Galilee, as nothing less than heaven's outpost on earth, an embassy. And Peter wasn't just a teacher stationed there. He was the one left in charge, the guardian, the ambassador instructed to hold the line until the master returned. But there's still another layer to this story, one that moves beyond history and into the mystical. The idea of preparing the heavens. What does that actually mean? It sounds less like metaphor and more like work, like construction. As if heaven itself wasn't yet complete. As if something still needed to be built, arranged, or made ready. It suggests that while Peter was holding his post on earth, Jesus Christ was actively shaping what came next. Building, preparing, expanding reality itself. That's a far more dynamic vision of the afterlife than what most people hear in a Sunday sermon. The team understood right away that they were dealing with something volatile. One sentence seemed to bridge everything at once. Earth and sky, history and theology, the physical and the divine. But as with discoveries like this, There's an even stranger possibility, because the final piece of the puzzle may not be buried in the ground at all. It may be written in the stars. If we take the inscription at face value, "Guard my house, for I go to prepare the heavens," it immediately raises a difficult question. Why this place? Why this exact location on Earth? Why would preparing the heavens require a specific physical site to be guarded? Some independent scholars and unconventional theologians have quietly proposed a bold idea. They suggest that certain places on Earth function as spiritual anchor points, locations where the physical world and the spiritual world intersect more closely. It's an ancient concept, often summed up in the phrase, "as above, so below," the belief that the material world reflects the spiritual one. But what if that idea isn't just symbolic? What if it's literal? What if the geography of the Earth is more than land and water, more like a network? And what if certain locations act as connection points within that network? If Jesus told Peter to guard the house while he prepared the heavens, could Bethsaida have been seen as one of those points, a place where two realms overlap? When you look at what was said to have happened there, the pattern becomes hard to ignore. This wasn't just another fishing village. It was a place where extraordinary events were remembered, where the blind were said to regain their sight. Thousands were fed from almost nothing. Jesus walked on water, openly defying the normal laws of nature. From a modern scientific perspective, it can feel as though the usual rules of physics were somehow thinner there, as if reality itself was more flexible, more responsive. So maybe guarding the house was never just about protecting a building, or even protecting a community of believers. Maybe it was about guarding something deeper, a boundary. That idea connects unexpectedly well with certain ancient Gnostic writings, texts that were later rejected by the early church. Many of them describe guardians or gatekeepers assigned to watch over thresholds between heaven and earth, light and matter. The mosaic discovered at El-Araj may be a surviving trace of that older, more mystical form of early Christianity, a version that didn't survive in its original shape. As Christianity became more organized under Roman Empire influence, the emphasis shifted toward structure, hierarchy, and formal doctrine. The more mysterious, cosmic interpretations were gradually set aside, and this discovery forces us to rethink the apostles themselves. Instead of seeing them only as teachers spreading a message, we might consider that they believed they were part of something far larger, something that involved guarding, standing watch, and holding a line between worlds. Peter was more than a fisherman who rose into leadership. According to this inscription, he was left behind with a specific responsibility to guard something important while Jesus departed. That suggests the ascension may not have been just a farewell. It may have been a departure that required someone to stay behind, to protect what remained. There's another detail that feels almost eerie. The church wasn't destroyed by invaders or erased by war. In the 8th century, an earthquake buried it. The entire structure disappeared beneath the earth, sealed away for more than 1,000 years, and now it has resurfaced. The timing feels striking. Maybe the message was never meant only for Peter. Maybe it was preserved for future generations. Guard the house, protect the foundation. Today, the site has been covered again for preservation. But the words have already been recorded. They can't be erased. The message has come back into the light. So the question remains, if Jesus gave Peter instructions that were never written into the Bible, what else might be missing? Or is this simply a beautiful mosaic floor, and we're reading too much into it? Tell us what you think. And if you want more buried history like this, make sure to like and subscribe.